What's up, everyone? We're back for another episode of Locked On Bucks. One day after Milwaukee take a 1-0 lead over the Chicago Bulls, we're going to continue to break down that game. Have a look at some of the defensive numbers in relation to the shots that the Bulls were taking in this game. We're going to talk about Defensive Player of the Year. Marcus Smart won it. Jrue Holiday wasn't really in the running, but that's very interesting to me. And we're also going to talk about Khris Middleton, who obviously had a down game in game one, and the people are upset about it, Justin. So we have to talk about Khris Middleton. Let's get started.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. I'm your host, Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday and after weekend playoff games as well. And also, you can find my work over at ESPN alongside me from the Bucks Radio Network. And of course, this podcast, Justin Garcia. We thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen or first watch of every single day as well, particularly as this playoff run just gets started. We really appreciate it. And speaking of the playoff run just getting started, Justin, back in the building for a playoff game, did it bring back all the memories? Did it feel as fun as what it looked for me, even though it may have been a bit of a different experience with what sounded like a few Bulls fans in the building?
Yeah, it like once you walked in the arena and saw the usual like layout of t-shirts and whatever the giveaway was, and you could feel like, oh man, this is a playoff game. Like, all right. That was the part that kind of felt a little bit like last year. But yeah, that was the bizarre thing was I saw a few people pointed out like, oh, it seems like it's around 85-15, the crowd split for Bucks and Bulls. It was 60-40, maybe even closer to 50-50, because it was very quiet for the first 2.5 quarters because there wasn't a whole lot to cheer for. But you could see smattering of red throughout the crowd. But in that third quarter, when the Bulls started to chip away, it started to get pretty loud in there. So it was a decent amount of Bulls fans in the arena on Sunday.
It was interesting. I was talking to Frank about this, and I was watching on League Pass over here, which gives you TNT, and I think TNT is doing something wrong with the sound. Fiserv Forum always sounds pretty quiet, and some people may say, well, when you've got a split crowd like that, obviously it's going to make a little bit of a difference. But I think there's something with the broadcast, because I've been in Fiserv Forum plenty of times where it has been really, really, really loud, and then you watch a replay and it just sounds deathly quiet as well. So there's something going on with the TNT broadcast. I don't know quite what it is, but ultimately the Bucks were able to pull this one out. And it was interesting because I did hear, and you listen to different podcasts, you listen to different analysis of this game and this win and what it means going forward. And we spoke about it a little bit. I think the Bulls, you should expect to shoot better than the low 30% from the field and the 18% from three. There's no doubt about that. But when you look at the best three players on either team, so for the Bulls, DeRozan, Vucevic, Levine had 60 points on 71 field goal attempts, which that's a lot of shooting and not a lot of scoring. But they actually outscored Giannis, Khris, and Jrue Holiday as well. So it's interesting to look at it from that perspective and say, well, if you're a Bucks fan, you're surely going to expect more than 53 points from those three players. They've produced that all season long. And Khris Middleton in particular, 4 for 13, clearly struggled to score. Turnovers, very interesting. Some of those turnovers, I didn't know what was going on. Some of the passes that really all the Bucks players were trying to pull off were head-scratching, to say the least. But a really, really slow start in game one for Khris. There's no way around it.
Yeah, and with the Khris component and the team overall, I've heard and seen a few people having that same conversation of, compare the Bucks 3 versus the Bulls 3, and you won't get another game like this if you're the Bucks. And even Dave Kane, we were talking about this off the air as soon as the game wrapped up, and kind of the same thing, like, well, you're not going to have very many games like this where you shoot this poorly in the playoffs. And maybe it's just the cynic, but we've seen enough of these runs in the postseason. Bucks shot 32% from 3 last year, and that's what I kind of tried to say too. Of no, I think we will. That we've seen enough from these last 3+ playoff years to know is kind of who this team is in the playoffs, and especially in game ones where they were 1-5 in game ones the last couple of years. And I look back at some of the shooting performances, and they're really bad in those performances. The ones where they've had better performances, but still lost, where there was less layoff. Last year in game 1 of the finals against the Suns, I think there's 2 days off in between the game in the bubble. Between the Magic series and the Heat series, they shot pretty well in those games and still lost. There was 1 or 2 days off in between those. But you look back at against Miami last year, it wasn't great. You had 7 days off where the starters didn't play. Yesterday or Sunday, you had 8 days off. So, we heard Jrue Holiday say that afterwards too, and I'm going to take him at his word that, hey, it was just the rust and the layoff that was a big part of the issue with the offense. But we've also seen quite a few of these types of performances. So to me, I'm really more curious, not so much with the offense and, oh man, I hope they don't have this again, but the defense and how they continue to take those strides, because that's why they won the championship last year. If you shoot 32% from 3, you got to have a really good defense, and they had one of the best playoff defenses we've seen in the last decade or so.
And that's why you believe that they can win the title again, because to your point, I've said that, and I mean it more for the Bulls. Like, I don't think the Bulls are going to shoot 18%. Yeah. I think there's some room to move for there for Chicago. But for the Bucks, yeah, I agree. I mean, it's not really that far below where they've been in previous playoff campaigns. Clearly, they don't like having long breaks. We've seen that time and time again, as you pointed to. And that's why I think when we were discussing game 2, we were like, geez, I wish it was just 1 day off, and then you get straight back into it rather than have this 2-day layoff. But Khris is, and everyone knows that listens to this podcast knows that obviously I'm a Khris Middleton guy. I think he doesn't get enough respect from the fans, and I always say this when it comes to controversial opinions, or mostly when it comes to slander, it doesn't have to be a huge section of the fan base that feels this way. It just has to be a few people that are overly noisy, which is certainly the case on Twitter. If you see it, it's certainly the case in our YouTube comments where there's some just garbage, to be honest, where people are just like, well, here we go, Khris Middleton again. I had someone tweeting that I've just been waiting for Khris Middleton to show up in the playoffs. Here we are. And I'm like, dude, go back 1 game. All you have to do is go back 1 playoff game to game 6 of the finals and go through the last playoff series, and you'll see a bunch of games where he played well. So it's just crap. I just feel bad because I feel like this is a guy that what he did last year, he should have goodwill for the rest of his life with this fan base. And for some reason, he continues to be the guy that's constantly maligned. And he played bad yesterday. Like, I'm fine with saying that Khris Middleton had a bad game because he did. He would know that, and he would accept that as well. But this constant crap about Khris Middleton being not good enough player, he can't play. I'm just like, just go back and watch last year and stop being stupid. I mean, I just, it makes me mad that just a lack of respect for a guy that's done a lot for the team.
Yeah, I mean, we'll never win. That after last year, if we're not past this after last year, then we're never going to get there. And look, it's everybody jokes about the Khris Middleton cycle, but a lot of that is true. Where he's going to have this game, and maybe it's game 2, and maybe it's game 3, but at some point in this series, he's going to be the reason. Maybe not this series, but in this playoffs, he's going to be the reason why they win the game, and he's going to be the guy that's hitting shots down the stretch and maybe scoring 40 and looking like the best player on the team. So it's you take the good with the bad, because there's far more good than there is bad with Khris.
All right, let's talk about Defensive Player of the Year. Next was awarded today. But if you do think that Khris Middleton is going to have a bounce-back performance in Game 2, then maybe you want to check out our friends over at Prize Picks, which is a daily fantasy option for NBA fans. You can try the award-winning app, Prize Picks, which is daily fantasy made easy. You guys know I like it. I've been talking about it for a while here on the show. You pick 2 to 5 players and an over and under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry, and it's just you versus the projected numbers. So it can be points scored. If you want to get behind Khris Middleton, you can do that. So it can be rebounds, it could be steals, and we've got a pretty good deal for you guys as well. For a limited time, PrizePicks has an exclusive no-brainer of an offer for all our listeners. Users get $50 free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point, but you must use the code NBA. That's right. This is an exclusive offer available to Locked On fans. Sign up today and use the code NBA for $50 free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point. So that's PrizePicks, daily fantasy made easy. And speaking of numbers, favorites, all these things, our friend over at BetOnline, you can check out the odds for this series. The Bucks are heavy favorites to take out this series. It would have been interesting to see what happened if the Bucks did lose this game yesterday, but they didn't. Also, NBA Finals MVP is something I've been plugging for a while there. Devin Booker, the favorite, then Giannis, the second favorite. Then Chris Paul is there as well. A lot of people are backing that it's going to be a Bucks and Suns NBA Finals. We'll see how that plays out. But BetOnline will have you covered for everything in that regard. It's your source for betting stats, sports info. And it's not just basketball. You can get the MLB as the Oakland Athletics off to a flying start in the Major League Baseball. So if you want to put money on the Athletics for the World Series, you can do that at betonline.net. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. Marcus Smart, Defensive Player of the Year, Justin. Let's just cut straight to the chase. What was your reaction to this award being announced? Which, by the way, I actually didn't know was happening today. It seemed to happen very quickly.
No, I didn't. Yeah.
I'm glad they're not doing the awards night, by the way. I didn't like that. But what was your reaction to this?
I didn't know it was being announced today either. That I just saw a lot of Marcus Smart discourse on Twitter, and then I had to do more digging. Like, wait, did they give it out? And then seeing Marcus Smart has been named Defensive Player of the Year. I guess I was surprised, but in hindsight, I shouldn't have been. I mean, the last couple of weeks when the conversation started taking place over Defensive Player of the Year, as the kind of like the conversation for the nerds of, yeah, talking about MVP is great, but actually we should focus on this because there's so many options here. I remember like hearing Marcus Smart being injected into that and just thinking like, I get it that Boston has been the best defense hands down, basically the duration of the season. I get it, but that doesn't mean they have to have the guy that's Defensive Player of the Year. So I never really understood it to begin with. And I was kind of telling you before we started recording, as much as we all, and I've been guilty of it, rail on Rudy Gobert and, even saying, look, if you give him a fourth Defensive Player of the Year award, there's only two guys in the history of the league that have done that. So, if people that weren't around in this era, if you go back 30 years down the road and like, oh, who is Rudy Gobert? He's one of three guys to ever win this. So he must be one of the greatest players of all time. I don't think that's the case, but still, I think you can make a much stronger case for Rudy Gobert to be Defensive Player of the Year than Marcus Smart. I mean, he's a good defender. He's an above average defender. Jrue Holiday is better, at that aspect of it. All right. I think Jrue Holiday's overall a better defender than Marcus Smart. So to me, it's just a head scratcher. I'll add this last thing. I'm all for them giving it to a guard and this opening the door for more perimeter players to get it and not just your big wings. But Marcus Smart isn't the guy.
Yeah, to your point, if Rudy Gobert hadn't have won those awards, he probably would have won it. Which is, by the way, what we've discussed with Giannis and MVP and all those types of things as well. Like, this is just whether you like it or not, this is the way they go. We talk about Giannis because this is Locked On Bucks, but I always use the LeBron example with MVP as well. I mean, he should have won it. I mean, there's so many years that he should have won it and he didn't win it and whatever. It's kind of crap the way that they do these awards, but we understand that's how it goes. But it's the only reason I don't like it. And I don't care. Like, as you said, like Marcus Smart is a fine defender. I'm not saying he's totally unworthy of the award, but it just doesn't sit 100% right with me that he's going to be this historic figure as winning a Defensive Player of the Year as a guard for the first time since Gary Payton. And it's like, well, he's not the best guard defender in the league, and no one thinks that he is. And so I think that if you look at Defensive Player of the Year, it's about the regular season. And I should say this, that we had the discussion last week, is Jrue Holiday going to be on an all-defensive team? Now, there's been a fair few ballots leaked, and I think that there's a reasonable chance that Jrue Holiday will end up on the second team this year. But he hasn't defended to his peak level during the regular season. So I don't think he should have won Defensive Player of the Year. That's not the argument I'm making, but he is a better defender than Marcus Smart. There's no doubt about that. And there's different levels to the way Jrue Holiday defends in the postseason as he does across 82 games in the regular season. But I guess that's the part that just doesn't sit great with me, that he is going to be this history-making award winner. And it's like, really? I don't know.
And look, if we're being honest, Giannis has been a better and more impactful individual defender than Marcus Smart has been this year. Now, for the making the case of a guard to win it, I think you could say we're biased, but I think we would all say I'll take Jrue Holiday in those spots over Marcus Smart. By the numbers, Marcus Smart has had a better year defensively than Jrue Holiday this year. It's not by a wide margin, but Giannis, for the mention that he was getting, this Jrue Holiday just he doesn't, we see him at that level in the playoffs, but in the regular season, he just doesn't get the attention, and he had a down year for his standards, as you pointed out. So he's not going to be in that contention. But also the Bucks defense has been bad. So that kind of takes Giannis out of the running. We're starting to get some of that momentum for Defensive Player of the Year and MVP. But when you see a defense that's been in the middle of the league at best for most of the season, that just kind of takes you out of the picture. So I think for Marcus Smart, it was a movement too of, hey, we can't just keep giving this to centers and big wings. Like, we got to give it to a guard at some point. Celtics defense has been incredible all season long. And, well, I guess Marcus Smart is the guy so far for that team. So by a combination of things, it just led to Marcus Smart this year.
Yeah, that's right. And I do think the team element has to come into it a little bit. But when you look at the Celtics defense as a whole, I'm sure if you spoke to some Celtics fans, they would say Robert Williams is the most important defender. Yeah. You'll also look at a series like the one against Brooklyn, and Jason Tatum's playing on Kevin Durant. So they have a number of excellent defenders on that team, just as the Bucks did when Giannis won Defensive Player of the Year with Brook Lopez and Eric Bledsoe. I mean, they had a number of elite defenders on that team as well. So it's always difficult to read into that. Now, Jrue Holiday did put on his Instagram story it was basically the Shams Instagram post, and it was just Shams' tweet saying that Marcus Smart won Defensive Player of the Year and a photo of Marcus Smart. Now, there was no congratulations. There was no angry face emoji. I don't know what it means, but it's just interesting. He's aware. He's aware of the fact that Marcus Smart won Defensive Player of the Year, and he probably feels like he continues to be a little bit disrespected with what he's done on the floor. Now, that's not him saying that. I'm just speculating that maybe he feels that way.
Yeah, and that's the best part about adding no caption at all. Is
that's right.
You leave it up to interpretation. Right. I think there's a little bit of both to it of, hey, congrats to Marcus Smart. And now this opens the door for more guards. But, man, when am I going to start to get the attention I deserve?
Yeah, I think that's probably part of it. And Jrue Holiday spoke about this after last year's NBA Finals when he was talking. I can't remember who he was talking to. It might have been JJ Redick or something like that. And he was doing the interview where he was saying that he thought it was really cool and he appreciated the fact that defensive plays were being shown as highlights, and everyone was talking about how good of a defender Jrue Holiday is. And he's like, a bit of respect for the defensive end. So I think there probably is some part of him that thinks about time that guards are getting some respect. He's probably just like, why hasn't it been me for the last 6 years? Well, I've been doing this night in, night out. So either way, I'm sure there will be some Bucks fans that will be very angry about this. I don't think it's a huge deal. I just thought it was interesting that this was the way this played out. We can talk some more defense in a little bit. And look, we know that the Bulls for most of the season have been missing some parts from their lineup. But if you're missing parts from your car, then go to rockauto.com, because with the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and then wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing only the brands their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. So save time and money, 30%, 50%, even 100% more that you would if you just go to a chain store. So that's why you go to rockauto.com for the reliably low prices. Go and explore their easy-to-use website today and find the solution for your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck right locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know we sent you. It's amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. I would say three-point defense is something that if you're a Bucks fan, you find yourself being frustrated about at times, despite the fact that we're 4 years into understanding the way the Bucks play defense. At times, you can ask yourself, well, why is there so many wide open threes going on? Yesterday was interesting because if you look at the points in the paint number, which is an area that the Bucks, I think coming into the series, we figured we're going to dominate. They led that count 42-32. So it wasn't a huge number for the Bucks. That's just about average. Defensively, they were pretty good, and the Bulls were 16 for 36 from the field in the paint, which is obviously a really bad number, below 50%. The Bucks were 21 for 33. So when they got in there, they scored pretty well. Although we saw time and time again that the Bulls were loading up in the paint, which is nothing new for the Bucks. They weren't able to capitalize on those threes. But I also thought the Bucks at times probably helped a little more than they needed to. Probably aware of Vooch, aware of DeRozan and what those guys can do individually. But the Bulls shot 37 3-point attempts in this game. They were 28.8 on the season, which is worst in the league. Frank spoke about the 3-point rate, which is more accurate number across the entire league, and they were very low in that area as well. The interesting thing for me, 19 of the 37 were wide open via NBA tracking data, and then another 14 were considered open, which means that 33 out of the 37 were with a defender at least 4 feet away, which is it's a pretty high percentage. Now, of course, Levine was 2 for 10. Vucevic was 2 for 10. Yeah. Caruso was 1 for 5. So they didn't capitalize. But the point being, I think that there is still some tidying up that can happen on the defensive end, particularly around the 3-point stuff, unless they just straight up believe that, look, we don't think you can beat us shooting the 3.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the thing you would hope for if you're a Bucks fan of, well, as you just gave the numbers, they take a very low volume of threes. They had a pretty high percentage of those makes, but a lot of that was coming from Lonzo Ball and what he was creating for that team too. That he was there, I think it was 43% that he shot on the year before his injury. So I'm sure there is a component to it of we just don't trust these guys. So we don't care if we help off and leave one of those shooters open. Even if it's Vooch there, I mean, we know what the Bucks defense is. It's going to give up those spots where Vooch takes most of his threes from. So I think, the 2 for 10 line, I think Vooch is probably going to take 8 to 11 threes a game in this series because that's what the Bucks are going to be willing to give him. And if you're the Bucks, I think your bet is we just don't think with the guys on the floor and with some of the spacing concerns that the Bulls have, we just don't think that they're ever going to connect on more than 30% of those threes. So we're fine with giving up those looks. You hope that's what it is because, a second round matchup with, if it is the Brooklyn Nets with guys like Kyrie and Seth Curry and Kevin Durant, you can't give them those looks. And with Boston, it's the same thing that they have enough shooting. And if you make it to the conference finals, it's the same thing with a team like Miami. So hopefully it is just that. And I think that's the one thing you want to really keep an eye on in games 2, 3, and 4, and hopefully it's only those games, is, how do the Bucks defend that line? And does it look like it's a conscious, okay, we're just more focused on other areas that we're going to give up some of those looks? Or is this the Bulls finding things? Because if they're finding things, that's a problem you need to clean up before the second round.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's interesting if you want to make a comparison to the first round series last year with Miami, the lead guy, obviously with the Heat, Jimmy Butler, different players defending him. And we saw a lot of Giannis actually on Jimmy in that first round series last year, but a guy that likes to shoot in the mid-range and was able to have absolutely no success at all across the 4 games of that series. DeRozan started off slow. He said there's no chance in hell that he's going to shoot like that again. Look, based on what we've seen this season, then maybe he's right. Although we spoke so much about the Bucks having game 1 struggles, we all remember the Raptors could never win a game 1. Maybe DeMar DeRozan was the game 1 curse, and maybe he's just as bad in game 1s as what the Bucks are. Everyone thought that he was destined to be a Milwaukee player at some point, so maybe that would have been the perfect fit.
Yeah, and we didn't see it a lot, but some of those possessions where we saw Giannis on DeMar DeRozan, it gave you some of those flashbacks to the Heat series where Jimmy just could not deal with the size of Giannis. And we saw it towards the end of the first half too, where there was a sequence in the second and third quarter where it seemed like it was like 3 straight possessions where DeMar just put up bad contested shots against Giannis. And I remember telling Ben Brust off the air as soon as we went to break too, like, if DeMar wants to continue to challenge Giannis, I am more than fine with that based off these last few possessions. So, that's just another thing, like the defensive player of the year, like we've seen what Giannis is able to do against perimeter guys and as a rim protector and not to reopen the conversation, but like some of those sequences, that was another thing of like, man, this guy, he can defend so many different positions where he's out there on the perimeter on point guards and he's picking up DeMar here and he's protecting the rim. That I think we're going to see a little more of that as the series progresses. He's obviously not going to take the lion's share of the assignment on DeMar DeRozan, but those were the interesting possessions to watch of when Giannis got the switch onto him or just took him straight up, and he contained him pretty well.
I think it's a good point. There was one possession in particular that I remember that DeRozan had the ball. He sort of got to the free throw line area. Then he had to move the ball away, and he actually couldn't get a shot off at all. But I think part of the decision-making process for Bud when he's deciding, well, can I put Giannis, or really do I need to put Giannis on DeRozan to win the series? I think maybe not, but I do think if he's not in foul trouble, we may see some of that in the fourth quarter, which is a move we've seen Bud go to in previous games. The one thing I wanted to bring up before we wrap it up, well, foul trouble is part of the story of yesterday's game, and we discussed the end of game situation. Clearly, I think there's a lot of people for good reason that say, look, probably even with 5 fouls, when there's only a minute left, leave Giannis on the floor. I think that's probably what most people would have gone to. But the rotation in general, I did see some, and I think mostly it's just people leaning back on what they've said in the past, talking about the rotation and stuff. As we kind of pointed to on yesterday's game, post-game show, he only played 9 guys, and Jrue and Khris Middleton played 39 minutes. And Giannis, even though the fact that he was in that foul trouble, spent portions off the ground, still played 34. So if he wasn't in foul trouble, he would have played 40 minutes. So I do think the days of saying, come on, Bud, play your players more, I don't think that that's an issue anymore. I think those days are gone.
Yeah, I mean, they've been gone for 2 years now.
That's right,
and the other good thing was everybody that wanted it, you got your wish. Granted, it was because unfortunately of an injury to George Hill, but we got to see quite a bit of Javon Carter because of that.
Yeah, that's right. And he played those 9 minutes. So this is why I've been so big on the fact that I just don't think that it's a big deal, whether it's George Hill playing or Javon Carter, because the minutes are going to be so minimal. And we're going to see different lineups where Bud will, obviously Drew's going to play major minutes, but then he's happy to have other guys handle the ball a little bit, mix and match lineups. And it's really just going to be some first half relief that Javon Carter will play. And I don't think we'll see him a lot in the second halves of games, but we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. But I think ultimately, hopefully, moving forward, foul trouble isn't much of an issue. And I saw a lot of people talking about the over-the-back foul, which, to be fair, in the moments, I was like, oh boy, this does not look good. I think they're going to call an over-the-back foul, so I'm fine. There will be Bucks fans that will say, no, it was a foul on Patrick Williams. I could go either way on that. But then if you're going to complain about that foul as a Bulls fan, then please bring up the Caruso what he wanted to call a hook, which is a play that happens 7,000 times in every single basketball game. So as long as you're willing to bring up both fouls, I will hear the arguments.
Yeah, I'm with you where I thought that was going to be called over the back, but it's, could you make a case for it? Sure. What they called on Patrick Williams was a foul that, he was basically undercutting Giannis and didn't go for the rebound and just kept boxing him out as he went airborne. And that is a foul. I hate it when fans point to bad officiating and blame the officiating, but this was a very poorly officiated game for both sides, I thought, yesterday. So seeing that when they could have really gone either way, it was not a great day for officiating yesterday.
No, it wasn't. And also, there was the foul, the offensive foul, which I guess they called a push-off on Giannis on a jump shot, which was not a push-off at all. It was just stronger, and DeRozan wanted to send himself flying. And the other one that was really weird for me was the offensive foul on Brook Lopez, where he actually split 2 defenders. So it was like 2 separate defenders took half a charge each. It was a very, very bizarre call that they called on Brook Lopez as well. So yeah, there was plenty of head scratches. I'm sure if you're a Bulls fan, you'll be able to point to 5 calls that you thought were ridiculous as well, which is all part of it. Like you said, I don't think it was the best game for officiating across this one. We've still got a day before game 2, so we'll have another podcast tomorrow. We'll look ahead to game 2 and what we can expect from that matchup. Around the rest of the East, Justin, the Sixers look like they're cruising. Miami had an easy win in game 1. I'm looking forward to game 2 between Celtics and Nets. We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but that would be who the Bucks would play if they can wrap up this series.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate too, the injuries that have happened with Toronto. Granted, Philadelphia looked great in the first half. That was probably their best half of basketball on Saturday, but the injuries certainly are a big story there as well. I mean, if you wanted to put out a hot take, could you really lean into Are we sure that all 4 Eastern Conference first round series aren't going to end up being sweeps?
No, I'm not sure. But
there's really one you would point to at this point of, well, this one might not.
The Nets will get a win, a solitary win.
That'd be the one.
Yeah. I think. But of course, I told you I don't predict sweeps, so Bucks are going to take care of their business in Game 2 here. The other series I can make predictions about. I got no problem in doing that, but I am not predicting a sweep in Bucks Bulls. I refuse. Call me a coward if you will, but I refuse to predict a sweep. Like I said, we'll be back tomorrow. Justin, you just get yourself prepared for Game 2. Rest that voice. All right, let's wrap it up. We'll catch all you guys tomorrow for the podcast. For Justin and myself, take it easy. We'll speak to you guys then.